Guys, Flynn Holbrook here with TruckSpy. I want to thank you, first of all, for joining our session today. We are well over halfway through our summer webinar sessions now, so I hope that you've gotten some valuable content. The content today changed just a little bit when we were going to talk generally about coaching and managing your cameras, and then FedEx released those KIs. And so I think the bulk of our conversation today, it's a nice marriage, but is how do you coach your drivers? How do you manage your drive cameras? How do you get the most out of your drive cameras? And then ultimately, how do you do all of that to meet those FedEx key indicators? So before we dive in, I want to just kind of give you a few ground rules for those of you that have joined many of these. You've heard me say this 10 times now. On the right-hand side of your screen is chat, polls, and handouts. Or maybe it's just chats today. I don't know what all you can see. I'm gonna put the first message up, and feel free throughout the session to post here. There's Tim. Tim beat me to it. Post your questions in that chat on the right. We're going to be marking those as questions. This is going to be kind of a panel discussion, so just like our other webinars, we're going to jump around and cover a whole lot of ground today. So first thing I want to do is introduce our guest. So first I've got Jon Stanley. He's the guy with the gray background behind him. Jon has 15, 16 years in the transportation industry. He has worked for, well, he's driven trucks, he's managed drivers, he's done risk management in the insurance, for insurance companies. Jon knows drive cameras and liability like inside and out, guys. I've gotten to know Jon just a little bit. He manages drive cameras, accidents, safety for some other TruckSpy customers, and that's how I got to know him. He's really good at what he does, and is a potential vendor with a disclaimer here if you need help coaching drivers and managing drive cameras. But today he's going to give us a whole bunch of free knowledge and tips. And I've got Dale Knox, and Dale is with Vorzik Transportation. Dale, you're in Pennsylvania, right?
Yes, sir. Erie, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, that's right. So Dale has probably forgotten more about transportation than I know or that I'll ever learn. Dale's been in the industry 40 years. He's been a driver. He coaches now all of Vorzik Transportation, so they're a FedEx contractor in Pennsylvania. He does all their driver coaching and is evidently pretty darn good at it, because you were what, runner-up Lytics Coach of the Year last year, right, Dale?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, I was.
Runner-up. They wouldn't give you the top spot. Somebody wrote a check for that.
Yeah.
Well, good. Well, hey, let's just dive in. So I think and Dale, you guys are using Lytics, right? I think most FedEx contractors are using Lytics.
Yeah, we started out with Linux, and so far that's been very good. We used Linux whenever I was a driver for Conway also.
So you've been around Lytics for quite a while.
Right. In fact, Conway was the first LTL company that ever put cameras in their trucks. And I was fortunate enough to be on that team that brought them out into the system and got the drivers used to them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. So what I want to do is I want to kind of structure this discussion away from camera provider versus camera provider, and just more generally, because I think the general assumption is we're all using Lytics. So let's talk about how we first let's lay out these FedEx key indicators, right? So there are four key indicators in this latest contract, and let's just dive in to each of those. And one of those, if I can pull this page up where I sent them out, the first one on this list is the Vader connectivity. So FedEx wants to make sure that your cameras are working and that they're communicating to the cloud. And they expect that you don't have more than 10% of your fleet that has not communicated in 4 days. And Dale, correct me if or Jon, if I just completely butcher this, but they want to make sure that your cameras work. The second thing that they want to do is percentage of triggering events which no operator has been assigned. So they want to make sure that you're assigning your drivers to your camera events. They also want to make sure that you're coaching those events within 4 days, and you've got to do that. You can't exceed 20% of non-compliance there. So you've got to do that at least 80% of the time. And then triggered events. So percentage of triggering events repeated within 60 days does not exceed 40%. So this is your coaching effectiveness score, right? John, am I describing this correctly? So
Yeah.
Cameras working, you're assigning drivers, you're coaching drivers, your coaching is effective.
I took these KPIs and I kind of broke them down into some simpler terms, because, you know, we can get hung up on these KPIs. I had these same KPIs when I was managing risk management for the insurance. We would push these same KPIs to the customers that we had, and really what it comes down to is all the things that are going to protect you as the carrier. And, you know, when we talk about connectivity and making sure that your vehicles are connected, they want to make sure that we don't have any tampering. The worst situation you can ever be in is to have a tampered camera and you get involved in an accident, because it shows, it gives a perception to the public that your driver was doing something they shouldn't be doing, something that they needed to hide. And so that's really why this KPI is in there. It's that cover your bases, so you're not left with a bunch of trucks where drivers have tampered with them, where we've got cameras covered up, or where we've unplugged them and they're not powered from the vehicle. So it's a fantastic KPI for you to have, and for you to have in your program to expect your drivers.
But the big challenge with this KPI, John, is that a lot of contractors, and Dale, I'll bet you guys are in this boat, you've got spare trucks that have the power disconnect switch flipped. They're sitting in the parking lot and they don't get started up for 4 days, right? And all of a sudden, especially if you're a guy with 6 trucks or 5 trucks and you can't exceed 10%, if you've got 2 trucks that don't move for 4 days, you're all of a sudden in non-compliance. So this, of all these KPIs, I've got to think that just from a practical standpoint, this is probably the easiest one to meet, but maybe is quite a bit of a pain in the rear end, right? Because you actually have to go out and start these trucks and make these cameras connect. John, what advice do you have for contractors to overcome that?
Well, you know, I was kind of in the same boat when I was running Lytics, and so I was a director of transportation for Sigma Transportation. We did food distribution in the Western United States, and our corporate office required us to have the same metrics. And some of the things that I did to combat this was I rotated my reserve fleet into rotation. I would put them on the road, you know, every 4 days or every 5 days, and try to rotate my fleet through. Now that's not always something you can achieve, because some of those trucks are, you know, they're obviously spares for a reason. So you may have to build in your program, going out and turning these trucks on and moving them in your yard, or at least powering them on. You know, my other thing, you know, that I would suggest is, you know, maybe we provide a list of all your spares to FedEx and advise, you know, these are spares, and see if they would accept that as well. We did that for insurance. We could see which ones were spares, and it's really easy to identify which one's a spare and which one's not, based off the amount of usage that vehicle has. And they're tracking your vehicles. We know that, and that's why they have the system in place. So find ways to rotate that equipment through. That keeps your equipment fresh and active, and you know, it'll help you meet this KPI as well.
And I think just John, and I don't want to interrupt you, but just one kind of interesting rumor that I heard yesterday from a contractor is that what FedEx actually gets from Lytics is a once a month data download that shows if you're compliant or not. So in practice, what it sounds like is happening is when they generate that download, you can either be in or out of compliance. It's not necessarily were you in compliance for the entire month. It's a snapshot in time of when they generate that report. Now I don't know when they actually do that. And again, this is Tim is clearing this up in the chat. He says it's the first of the month. So maybe what that tells us is that we need to be compliant the last week of the month, every month. And you need to go out and start all your spare trucks, right? And make sure that you're going to hit that KPI.
Well, I would imagine they're gonna compile that data over a 30-day period of time. So it'll be the entire month that data is gonna get piled together. And so when you're talking about 10%, that means, I mean, you're gonna have to have, you know, in a fleet of 10 trucks, if you got one spare, you know, you're gonna have to fire that truck up every week. And
yeah,
you know, I mean, at least once a week you go out there and you flip it on. So, and I see this comment from Alicia, putting the truck out of service in Lytics. I think that's a fantastic idea. That will pull that truck out of service with Lytics, so it's not going to be tracking the data for that particular truck. You just got to make sure that you manage that, and you don't have a truck that's out of service on the road. So when you have to put it on the road and that, you know, that camera's not working or you didn't fire it back up, that's going to put you in trouble with FedEx and the public if something happens. I think that's a fantastic idea to combat it.
Dale, how are you guys tackling?
I get with my fleet manager every Monday. And the tractors that we've had out of service, I put them out of service. In Linux, you can put them out of service, and you can also put them in spare mode. And when they're in spare mode, they come on when you have to use them. We got the same problem, Tim. Some of our trucks set for 4 or 5 days. And when you put them in that spare mode, that covers you for whenever it comes back into, and you don't have to run out there, you know, once a week and start it. The out of services, if you got a fleet manager or something, you work hand in hand with him. I don't know. That's what I do. They let me know when a tractor's going in and it's going to be down for more than 4 days. Then I'll put that tractor out of service. Same note, when it comes back in service, my driver managers let me know, send me an email, and right away I put them back in service. That way you can have all your that KI covered as long as you got Linux, that you got them options there.
Yep. Okay, so that's the first KI. It sounds like we've got some methods that we can get there. What about our second one? John, break this one down.
Yeah, man, really, if you don't have a driver assigned to that event, how are you coaching? And how are we mitigating the behaviors that are observed there? So, you know, really having all of your events assigned to a driver is super crucial in making sure that we're helping support that driver in changing their behaviors. And I, you know, my assumption is FedEx wants to see this because no driver assigned, no driver was coached, and that's a problem. We can't address behaviors without having coaching issued. So I think them giving you 15% leeway on that. We know who our drivers are. This should be a really easy KPI to meet. And imagine that we wouldn't have any scenario where we wouldn't know who's driving.
John, I think you're breaking up just a little bit there, John. Sometimes I don't know if it's your headset or mic or what it is.
My headset,
so Dale,
I'll switch here.
Oh, okay, there you go, perfect. So Dale, tell me, I mean, from your end and actually doing this every day, I mean, you just got to go in there and watch the alerts, right, and assign drivers.
Well, right now, that's correct. The alerts comes on my emails. But I go in there and I look at every event and I sign them myself. And I have each one of, I've got 3 regions. I got Central, Eastern, and Western. And I got driver managers there. And I'll send these send these events to them to be coached. Now, that way that I'm in charge of making sure that the cameras are working. I'm in charge of making sure that they get assigned. And it's up to my driver managers within 4 days when they get that they have to get them coached. I keep
So Dale, does this,
when it gets close
does this-
to the 3rd day and they don't have them coached, they'll get an email, and then I'll end up coaching them if something happens.
so Dale, what I'm hearing is that this second KI doesn't really scare you to have to assign your camera events to your driver.
No, it don't. In fact, right now I have 31 different behaviors that I coach on. So them knocking it down to 20, that's like a relief for me. But I'm still going to keep my 31, but where FedEx is only requiring the 20, then that's what, but I'll still keep coaching the same as I'm coaching.
Got it. Okay. So Alicia asked, any ideas on how to convince drivers to uncover the inside camera? We're having a really hard time.
I got some things for this too. You guys are able to hear me better. So
yeah,
we can much better.
Okay, so here's the biggest problem that we see with cameras, in my opinion, and Del, I'm going to have you back me up on this or correct me on this, right? I think the biggest problem is we have to teach our drivers why cameras are in the trucks in the first place, and when they better understand why do we have cameras in the first place. We have cameras because right now those drivers have a humongous target on their back. The public is out to get them, and we've built a beast in this industry where plaintiff attorneys will do anything to take you down, do anything to put your skills and your professionalism on trial. And when we cover up those cameras, you're taking every bit of protection away from your managers. When cameras are covered, you've lost all protection for that driver. We cannot prove that they're doing everything that they need to be doing. And I'll give you an experience of my own. I live here in Denver, Colorado, and most of my career was in food distribution as a driver and as a transportation manager. And I know a driver of the name of Noe who I knew. I worked side by side with him. He covered his camera and clipped a highway patrolman on the side of the highway and killed him. And because that camera was covered, there was no way that we could prove that he was trying to get over to the left lane. There was no way that they could prove that he was doing everything in his power to avoid that accident. And he's sitting in prison right now. And 2 lives were lost that day. That young man has small children, a wife, and he's in prison and will be for another 10 to 15 years. And it's because his protection was taken away. There was no way to prove that he was doing everything in his power to avoid that accident. Teach your drivers why the cameras are in there in the first place. You cannot protect them if they cover up that camera. They've wiped out all your protection. Explain to them, I don't have time to sit here and watch you pick your nose. That's not what I do with my time. What I do with my time is I build protection for you. I build a defensible program for you. And when you come from that standpoint, drivers will start changing. I'd also add to this, consider bringing your drivers in and have them develop your camera program. What does that camera program look like for them, and how do you make it their program and not your program? How is it? How do you change it to make it their program where they're bought in to why the cameras are there, and they help you develop the policies and the processes to make them safe on the roadway?
Yeah, I will agree with you 100%. Anytime you hooked up to, most especially a FedEx ground trailer, that's a billboard going down the road saying, "Sue me." I've seen it time and time, and I've been in court cases where the camera, I'll put it to you this way. The camera has helped the drivers more than it's harmed them. And when I'm doing my coaching, and I've trained my driver managers myself, is just like you just done. Give them scenarios to let them understand why the camera's in there. Something that's happened or something. In fact, I show them a head-on collision that we had with one of our drivers. It's right after I started with Vorzik, my first major accident. And I was on scene, and when I arrived, the first thing they said, the driver left the center and hit the 19-year-old boy that was just coming from Bible school singing choir, and hit him head on. And so after my investigation and the state trooper, it totaled that truck, knocked the batteries plumb out of the truck. I couldn't get the video at this time, but the one thing that my driver kept telling me as they was taking him out in the ambulance, "Dale, look at the video, look at the camera. It'll show you what I was doing. The camera will tell you." So I took her battery down, took the camera out, had it uploaded, and took it to the state trooper at the barracks there, seen it, and it was plain that my driver was doing everything possible that he could do, both hands on the steering wheel, seatbelt on, and was not distracted. The 19-year-old with his dad in the car with him went left to center. The video shows that there was nobody driving the car when the impact happened. I seen that on the camera. What happened, the boy, dad had dropped the cell phone. Both of them was looking for his cell phone. His dad looked up right before the impact, snatched the boy off over. The boy lost both of his legs, but if the dad hadn't have pulled him over, he would have lost his life. But the camera, I could see all that in that camera.
And those are the experiences we should be sharing with drivers. We forget to be transparent with our drivers. You know, I often refer back to it's like my family. If I care, if I genuinely care about my kids, I'm going to tell them about the dangers of this world. And I don't hold anything back. And if we genuinely care about our people, we've got to not hold anything back. Share, be transparent with them, teach them, educate them, but make them part of that process. Drivers became drivers because they didn't want to be micromanaged, and they didn't want to be, they didn't want to have the thumb in the back. You know, that's why we went to the open road as drivers. So let them build that program. Let them help you create the program that's going to work best for them.
Not only that, when you're doing your coaching, to open up the driver's eyes, most especially if you got a driver that's got a kind of negative attitude. Take, for instance, a falling too close, less than a second. My first question with them, are you married and got a family? Yeah. Well, how would you like that a truck was less than a second on your wife's tailgate on her car, and she had a blowout and that driver cremated her, hit her, and God forbid that they got hurt seriously. But think about how you would feel if that happened to you, and here you are doing the same thing that would make you mad. Put your family in front of you that you're tailgating less than a second, that hits home for a lot of guys.
So what I'm hearing here, guys, is, and this leads us perfectly into these second two KIs, is it's really important how you communicate this camera program to your drivers and how you coach your drivers. It's probably, I don't know how many people in this session, as an outsider here, I mean, I've not had to do that much coaching in my career, but my gut instinct would be, why the hell are you tailgating? Like, back off, right? But it sounds like that's probably not the most effective way to be coaching these drivers.
Well, here's what a lot of the problem is. A lot of your people that coach, most specialists this day and time, is people that's not, correct me if I'm wrong, that a lot of them is people that's not sat in that seat of that truck before and don't know, and they just going off of what they've been told and everything. What's unique, and I agree with you, getting drivers involved in it. And in fact, I got a couple of lead drivers that I gave them permission to coach also. At the same time, eyes is on them even more than it is on, because I was in that spot. I was a driver and then I coached when I was with the other company, with Conway. And it's even tough because you as a driver, all eyes are looking on you and they saying, well, you're doing the same thing that I'm doing. How come you telling me how to drive? It's totally different, because at any time you can pull up my videos and everybody knows when you do something wrong, when you're in that position. So if you do pick lead drivers, make sure that there's some that's got positive attitudes, and you train them to talk to them and coach them as a driver, not as somebody that these are the rules and you got to obey by them. Because if you coach to them like what you would like to be coached to, you get farther ahead.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with Dell on that. And I'm seeing some questions come in here on the chat that I think some of this coaching stuff will help answer some of these questions for Annette and for Dan.
And
yeah,
Dan
so
has the same question. Yep.
So the companies that I'm managing their cameras for currently, we have this come up quite a bit. Following distance is it's a huge deal. Traffic.
And John, let me read the question just for the recording afterwards. So Dan and Annette are talking about following distance. They want to know, if we're in traffic and cars are always cutting in front of us, how in the world can we maintain following distance? So John,
this is where defensive driving comes into play. We know that cars are going to cut into us, and we have to anticipate that they're going to do that. And we also have to remember that in the litig system, you're in charge if that's a coachable event or not a coachable event. You as a coach can determine that and document it as such. And so here's what I've always used as a rule of thumb. If a car cuts in front of one of my drivers and that driver doesn't let go of the gas and give them space and create the space in between them, then I'm going to coach them. I'm going to document that as a coachable event. If they do, they back off the gas, they back off the throttle, and they allow that car to cut in front of them, and then they create space in between them to where it's not a following distance issue anymore, then that's not a coachable event. That driver did everything that they were supposed to do. We have to teach this technique, because reality is that car is going to cut in front of them, and then if they, for whatever reason, can't stop or slow down, when traffic slows down and they rear end that car, it doesn't matter if that car cut them off 2 miles back or a mile back, they're going to get charged with an at-fault accident. And so we have to teach to drive more defensively. 95% of defensive driving is to manage everybody else on the roadway, not your own behaviors. And so give distance in between. Drivers these days, they feel like I have to stay in that traffic. I got to be in that pool. And I've used a few hands-on techniques where I've taken some grown men and I've put them in a classroom and I've had them stand right next to each other, face to back, and it's uncomfortable for them. And I've said to them, why would you do it on the highway? Why would you put yourself in that position on the highway? If it's so uncomfortable in person, it should be more uncomfortable while you're behind the wheel. So teach that. Give space. When I'm driving a semi truck and I've got traffic ahead of me, I've got 1.5 truck lengths in front of me, so I don't have to be cut off. They just move in. I never have to touch my brakes. I never have to stop. I just continuously roll. So we can manage that if we're effectively teaching defensive driving techniques.
So John, follow up here from Dan is, well, it doesn't really matter if it's coachable or not, but if it repeats within 60 days, we've triggered
Correct.
our fourth KPI.
Yeah.
So how do we combat that? I mean, how can we possibly meet that fourth KPI?
We have to get out of the box in how we coach and how we train. If you've coached them and you're not following up with them, we're not having consistent engagement with those drivers on that behavior over that 60 days. I would coach a driver and then I would follow up with them 3 or 4 days later. How are you doing? What are you seeing? What are you doing to progress in that behavior? Are you leaving more room? Stay in touch with your drivers. And I know it's hard. It's easier said than it's done. But we have made a bad habit in this industry to say, hey, I've coached you. I had a conversation with you, and then I leave you alone, and you're fine. We have to stay engaged with that driver, especially if they've had a habit that's been a long-term habit. This doesn't change overnight.
I'd like to add a little bit to that. These 4 KIs, in fact, I just had a meeting with FedEx this morning for the webinar. I'll be honest with you guys, that KI right there, that is going to be the worst KI that we have. And because of that following distance. And we can coach the best we can, but that KI right there, John, is going to be one that all contractors is going to have a problem with. It's going to be one that I'll say 95% of the contractors is not going to hit that KI. It is no way. And most especially when they got it at 4 seconds following distance, if you're at 3.5 and then you get another one within 60 days, and that 4 seconds, that rule was made way back in the 70s, maybe the 60s, but triple amount of vehicles is on the highways now. That 4 second following this almost impossible. I mean, I ain't going to.
That's more than a football field, right? That's like Tim says the math is 95 feet per second. So that means we're 400 feet. So we're a football field and a quarter.
Well, if you're traveling 55 miles an hour and you're traveling about 75 feet per second at 55 miles an hour. So 4 seconds, it's going to be about a football field. And I'm going to tell you right now, with the way the highways are nowadays, it is going to be absolutely impossible for any contractor to hit that 4K.
Here's kind of my and Del, you're more experienced in lytics than I've ever been. I worked with lytics for about 4 years. So correct me if I'm wrong, but when you're in that system, you can mark those events as not applicable, or you can correct the actual initial coaching or initial view of it. So here's and we have to be honest in how we're coaching these drivers, because you're not going to make real change. You're not going to make any change in your organization if you don't. But that's why I say, when you're looking at that behavior and you see that a driver's got a car that cuts in front of them, if they back off the throttle and let the car take off and create space in front of them, then you have to document that as such. You document that they did everything they're supposed to do. But if you got a driver who's riding down the highway and he's following at 1 second, and he has consistently, that's a behavior that needs to be coached. But if you look at this this effective coaching KPI, they're giving you that you need to have a coaching effectiveness of 60%. That's pretty lenient. And I'll tell you, I worked with a mail company in Texas who had 100% repeat behaviors. Their coaching effectiveness was 0%. They were having anywhere from $3.5 to $4 million in loss every year. Massive accidents. Okay. All I did with them was get their managers engaged and taught their managers to have consistent, regular conversations with drivers. In 3 months' time, they went from 0% coaching effectiveness to 87% coaching effectiveness. Okay, so that means only 13% of their events or their drivers were having repeat events. This is not a hard KPI. If you remain consistent and you stay steady and constantly coach and constantly get engaged, your drivers will make the change. They're giving you 40% here. They're saying that, you can have 40% of your behaviors can repeat in 60 days. That's pretty lenient.
So Dale, does and I'm curious on this, does the Lytx camera, if I get cut off as a driver and I immediately let off the throttle, and I think somebody in the chat said that it won't record the event, right? Even if I don't have 4 seconds, but the car's cut in front of me and I'm creating space. Is that true?
Yeah. What happens is in order for them to cause the event, it has to be at that 1 second for 4 seconds. Okay, if it's less than a second, you have to be in that position for 4 seconds before it put it as an event. So therefore, if you let off your accelerator, just like you said, John, let them get ahead of you, they won't coach you. But then if you back off, and say you back off to 2.5 seconds or 3 seconds, and you stay there 4 seconds, then they're gonna nail you again, even though you backed off. That's where, and I agree with you 100%. Coach. That's the only way, because I've seen it over my speeding. I've seen it over everything. The more you coach face to face, the better you're going to have your scores. And I'm not saying that we can't get it down to that, John. I'm just saying that's going to be the toughest one, and there's going to be a lot of contractors that's not going to hit that KI. The best thing I can say is, just like you said, coach them, give them statistics, give them personal experiences, open their eyes. I had one gentleman that, when I first started doing this with Vorzik, had 300 and something events. Now it goes down to maybe 10 every 2 weeks. So coaching is effectiveness is good, but we're going to have trouble with that even though it's 40%, we're still going to have.
Yeah, I agree with you. It is going to be a difficult task, but it's not an impossible one. And that's where you're going to have to just dig into your organization and your structure and understand how are we going to remain consistent and constantly coach. Those 2 last KIs, they go together. They, if you're always coaching and you don't let that coaching lag for a period of time, it's not overdue, we're staying on top of them, it's going to drive those behaviors down. Your drivers are going to know that it's important to you. They're going to know hey, they're not going to back off. And it goes back to that statement I made earlier. Nobody wants to be managed when they're on the road. They don't want to hear from you. They don't want to have you calling them and telling them, hey, you've got this going on, this behavior. They will correct the behavior, or they're going to remove themselves from the situation completely. And that's where you got to be careful. It's where you got to have some tender feet. Is don't get into coaching fatigue as well. That's a horrible place to be, where they just stop listening to you because you've coached them so much. Get creative in how you coach them. Get creative in how we motivate them to be the drivers you need them to be, and again, make them part of this process. Build a committee of drivers to better understand, hey, this is what we're up against. How would you guys help us combat that? We can't change the KI. FedEx isn't going to budge on it, right? This is what they've set out. They've already put it on paper. It's pretty much there for you. So help me figure this out. Mm-hmm. Call on your drivers to have them help you. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised with the consistency, what happens with this KI. I really am.
So do you think, John, that you just tell the driver, right? Do you just say, look, I mean, FedEx has given us this KI, and I need you to help me meet it?
I think it goes back to transparency. I think it's a matter of just being open and honest with them, and ask for their help because of what you're up against. Tell them what's expected. I see some of these comments coming in of, 5 o'clock traffic in Nashville. Can we really leave a football field? Bonnie, I maybe it's not a football field, but we don't need to be half a car length away from a driver or from a vehicle either. I think we get to, create some space. Doesn't need to be a football field. If traffic is that tight and that packed, we're not going 65 miles an hour. We're probably doing 20 or 30 in traffic. So your distance is going to be less than a football field. But if traffic is moving at 65 miles an hour, absolutely you have a football field worth of space, in my opinion.
And so when that car cuts in front of you, Dale, to your point on how the camera works, you as a driver, you might not even, you obviously let off the gas, but you might also have to hit the brake, right?
Exactly. And go along with what John says. If you see that car cut in front of you, and you let off your accelerator, and then you have to hit your brake and because traffic stops in front of you, we can look at that, and we can, it's really our opinion if we're going to coach on it or not. And in your coaching session, or your notes, you can put in there, the driver done everything that he was supposed to do. He's not being coached on this. I've done that quite a bit on with my driver managers. I put that whenever I assign these, I put that in my notes that you can show it to them. It's a good thing to also show them those things like that, John, that you don't coach them on, and tell them why, because that kind of opens up their eyes, because next time that something like that happens, he knows that if he backs off and keeps that distance,
yeah, absolutely. That I agree with that.
He's not going to get coached.
That goes back to transparency, right? Hey, here's what I didn't coach you on. Go ahead, Del.
Yeah. So even though that I don't mark it down to be coached, I always let them know this is what we want. So they got something to kind of judge.
And Peter brings up an interesting point here too. There are some other effective tools that you can use, and when you start talking about safety incentives and how we incentivize and how we bonus, our employees, your safety bonus should drive the performance you expect. So I just created for a customer who's actually a TruckSpy customer. I just created a progressive discipline process for camera events, and what we did is we developed that your bonus your bonus structure is effective after the third repeat behavior in 90 days. And so if you have a repeat behavior in 90 days, you've already been coached twice verbally or virtually through direct coaching through their system, and then on that third one you get a face-to-face and you lose your bonus for the quarter. So there are multiple creative ways that you can make them accountable and hold them accountable. I've seen companies that will build a structure if you hit a certain score on your particular camera program, and Lytics has a scorecard if I'm not mistaken. If you hit a certain threshold or you hit a certain score, then you qualify for bonus. So you don't lose them after they've created, the problem, right? Many times if you take the bonus away, well, screw it, I'm gonna drive how I drive, and then I'll try again next quarter. So maybe build. Yeah. Yep.
Well, maybe there's a positive incentive, John, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but this thought just jumped in my mind. I mean, you could structure a positive incentive here that says, if I coach you and you don't exhibit the same behavior in 60 days, I'm going to give you $50 or $100 or whatever. And obviously you got to track that. You need a big Excel sheet.
Absolutely.
But I think you can use incentives to help accomplish these KIs.
Well, I've got that in process now. I offer a $200 bonus, and I use my drive cam events. I got 4 events that if they don't trigger it in that 3 months, then they get a $200 bonus. I also run contests all the time. In fact, I'm in Altoona as we speak because I'm doing a state cookout for all my drivers down here in Altoona because they're green across the board on their coachable scores and their events. So they drop down into the green. So I said if they'd done that in the quarter, then I would give them a state cookout. So I hope
What's
it don't
incredible
rain
about
because
that,
I'm going
Dell,
to be
is
standing out
you're
there
doing a
cooking
couple
steaks
things.
on the grill
So
to
you're
die.
incentivizing, but then you're also showing
That's funny.
that you're a servant leader as well. And when you stand side by side with your employees in the trenches and you're willing to sacrifice your time to do something for them and to serve them, that goes so much further than a check that you could ever cut for them. And so if you can get in the trenches with your employees and create a culture of I stand by you,
Absolutely.
I'm here for you, I'm literally in your corner, by standing in the rain and cooking some steaks, nothing will say I've got your back like that than anything else. So, there's another statement in here that goes hand in hand with incentivizing is, Scott said we add additional training for repeat behaviors. Constant remedial training is a key as well. We can coach, but if we don't give them tools to fix the behavior, they're not going to know what to do. So provide remedial training. Give them some training outside of that coaching. Don't forget that coaching, that's not remedial training. That's coaching. Give them a formal training program or formal training to follow up to that behavior. There's tons of resources out there. There's tons of YouTube videos you can give if you don't have a formal training program that you're using right now. There's also a lot of online platforms you can tap into as well for training. But if we don't follow up with training, you're missing the beat. You're totally missing the point, and they're going to continue that behavior completely. So Smith System defensive driving is a huge retraining tool. Consider getting somebody in your organization trained to teach that. That's fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Not only that, but with FedEx mandating that all their contractors have elf cams in them, that can be used as a tool. I'll coach my drivers and I'll tell them use that elf cam as a tool to keep that camera from coming on, because the closer you get to the vehicle in front of you, the more beeps that elf cam comes out with. And so I've trained a lot of my drivers when they hear that first come out, let off of it a second, till it quits, and then you got your proper following distance. So that's a big tool that I'm using right now. And FedEx Linehaul Contractors right now has to have ALF cams, and I think the P&D people's going to have it in the future. But that's a big tool that you can use to keep that camera from coming on.
Yep. Yeah, so guys, a couple of questions, and that's great. So Smith system, use the FCAM, give these drivers some tools. Dale, have you shared Dan wants to know if you've shared your opinions on this following distance with FedEx. And if you did, Michael wants to know what was the feedback and are they willing to change?
Well, yes, I have. In fact, I just had a meeting with safety specialists in the Atlantic area today, and she's going back to with some of my suggestions. I have also some of their forms and everything they having. I'm going to be working hand in hand with FedEx on the following distance. When they first come out with these KIs, now they have changed, because when they first came out with the KIs, it was 60% of coaching effectiveness, and you was only supposed to get 3 of the 4, and then they changed it here recently. So one thing about FedEx, if you can, that I found out over the 4 years that I've been here, if you can show them that, I don't really want to know how to say it, but if you can prove your point, they'll listen to you. And I think as a contractor for FedEx, I think we all have the same problem. The KIs are fantastic, but let's make them to where we have to work for them to get them, because after all, they're going to eventually go on our safety score. They're going to use these KIs on our safety scores. So make it hard for us to reach it, but on the other hand, make it to where we can reach out there and grab it at the same time.
FedEx's DOT number here. So
right.
The alternative would be you go out and get your own DOT number, and then when you're in an accident, it's $10 million that you get to pay instead of FedEx writing the check. So, I mean, I understand the point of the KIs, and probably at the end of the day, as much pain as it is to get there, it probably makes all of these businesses, better, right? Safer, makes FedEx's business better. And maybe, I don't know, just spitballing, maybe if there's less accidents and less lawsuits, there's more money for rate increases, because in this last agreement, we sure didn't get very much of that. So, I mean, at the end of the day, right, like maybe it's a good thing, but we have to go through the pain of actually getting there. So Mark asked a question that I think is interesting. I don't know the answer. Dale, you probably know the answer. How do we assign or address mechanics moving our trucks and getting violations?
Okay, I have 3 mechanics, and they're on my drive cams. They get a tool bonus. If they get an event on drive cam, they lose in a quarter. The incentive for them to follow all the rules is they don't get their tool bonus for the quarter. So they have.
What do you do about third party mechanics, Dale? Because you can pull your mechanics bonus, but a lot of people don't have their own mechanics. So
right, and we got the same thing. We operate in 9 locations, and we have vendors do that. The camera, in your drive cam, they have a mechanic unknown, and that when I assign it, I'll assign it to driver mechanic unknown, because you can't really coach them, because you don't, and I don't know if that goes into your KIs or not, because that's a good question for me to ask for FedEx themselves or Lennox. What about the mechanics unknown? I don't think that'll go against your KIs. I know when you have a rental truck that's got a temporary drive cam in it, those events don't go towards your KIs. So I'm believing, if I'm not mistaken, that a mechanic unknown
I
is
would
not
certainly
going to go
send the
against your
video to their
KIs.
management team, though.
Because
I've done
by
that
all
plenty of
means, you ain't
times.
going to go to
They're
that
driving your
vendor
truck.
and coach that mechanic.
If there's an issue
So,
and they end up getting in an accident in your truck, that puts you down. So, you know, I mean, I've done that many a times as a transportation manager or director of transportation that was managing a fleet. That
true.
If I had an event in my truck that was a mechanic from a vendor, that vendor heard from me. If I had it multiple times, I switched vendors. You know, it was easy as that, and they took it serious because they want your business. You know, I want to chime in this thought too, is when we talk about these KPIs, I think we're foolish to think that FedEx would create KPIs so tight that they lose every one of their contractors because of it. Because they need you, right? They need you on the roadway. Otherwise, they wouldn't have had a third-party contractor program. And so if these KPIs are not attainable, they're going to adjust them to be attainable. So don't get feared with these KPIs, but show that you're putting every effort possible to meet these, that you're doing everything that you can in your power to ensure. But I will tell you that if there's 50% of the companies out there can hit all these KPIs, then it's attainable, and they're going to hold everybody to it. But if 80% of you can't, and only 20% can, they're not going to lose 80% of their contractors. That's too detrimental to their operation. So, you know, have some trust and faith in the process that they've developed, that they're not going to set you up for failure, but they are pushing you to attain these, because in the long run, it's going to help your bottom line. Your expenses are going to be less because of these KIs. When you meet these KIs, the driving behaviors of your drivers are going to save you money, period, hands down. You will become more efficient, and the camera program will pay for itself in the long run.
Right. And that gets back to my point whenever I say it's going to be that fourth KI, it's going to be hard for us to meet. You just hit the nail on the head there, John, when you said that FedEx looks at it and I agree with you 100%. Do the best you can, and if just like I said, 95% of the contractors not going to hit that. So they'll either, I think FedEx will either change it to where it's hard for us to reach it, but yet and still we can reach it. So just like I said, they dropped it already from 60% to 40%. So, and I made a suggestion in 30 days, 60 days, drop it down to 30 days. And that's more reachable than 60 days.
Yeah, and reality
so
is they're
everything's set up. They're going to
holding
do
these
everything
KIs and putting
monthly.
these
So
KIs in place because they
why
need
not
to
let
have a
that be
defendable
part of
program.
that monthly?
And you guys are part of that program. You're part of that defense. So, you know, this can be done. In all the transportation
Absolutely.
fleets that I've managed, I've seen this happen. Denver's got some horrible traffic as well, and you know, my repeat behaviors for following distance were coaching effectiveness was 85 to 90%. So it can be done with good culture and good training and consistency. You can do this. I know you can. It can be done.
Yep.
There we go.
I've got a question from Randy here that I'm looking at that it kind of hits home with me. If we could get off.
Yeah, sorry. Go right ahead. I might have missed a question. Please, Dale.
About the Volvos. All of our trucks are Volvos, and I know what he's talking about. When the sun visors pull down, it kind of blocks the view of the camera, and you get nailed for event for that, for obstruction. I coach my drivers, and that sun visor don't need. I show them that sun visor don't need to be straight up and down. It's just like in your car. If you move that sun visor to the front of the windshield, you're gonna get far more protection that way, and it ain't gonna block the camera. So I tried that with my drivers. So far, it's working out good. Or either pull it down just far enough to where it blocks the sun, and or put it to the front. I think that's going to help.
Or just do what Tim says and just buy all your driver's sunglasses and tell them not to use them.
Well, my operation manager told me to. I've got one driver that at nighttime, all the time, he wants to pull that sun visor down. So I said, well, when it comes in for service, I'm going to take the sun visor plumb out of it. So he suggested putting one of those clear ones, the yellow coated ones in there.
I have
for
a fleet
night
manager
vision.
that actually cut a
So
square out
that
in the
way he can
visors
still
where the
see and the
camera's at.
camera
So when
still
we pulled
see
it down,
him.
you could actually
So,
see straight through.
I
And the
might
sun
just
visor
try
was still
that
functional,
and see how
and the
that
camera
works.
was able to
There
see.
you go. Well,
So it was really effective. Really effective. I had no issues with obstruction when we had those visors cut out.
there you go.
Yeah, that's yep. You'll have about $100 expense with the RotoZip.
Yeah, and
But
Volvo's
it's
not
doable.
going to do that for you, but that's a modification, Randy, that you could make.
That's a fleet manager modification.
Yeah. Yeah, there we go. Well, guys, look, I think that this has been a great session. Unfortunately, we're out of time. I think we could probably go on all day long about this, these KIs and these cameras. I want to just, while I thank our guests, so our next webinar, 2 weeks from today, same time, same place, we're going to talk about your maintenance. And I just put a link up on the screen. If you have not registered for that session, jump in there and register. So we're going to talk, Jim, actually with Vorzik. So Dale, Jim owns Vorzik, right? And
Absolutely.
he's going to join us to talk about his maintenance program, how he is tracking maintenance, how he's utilizing third-party vendors. He's built a phenomenal program. So join us for that. Jon, Dale, thank you guys so much for making some time today. I think we've had a phenomenal discussion. And for all of you that have attended, thank you so much for taking an hour out of your day. We hope that you found this useful. We'll be emailing this session out to everybody sometime tomorrow once it's done being recorded and encoded. So thank you guys very much. Have a lovely rest of the day, and let's get to work on these KIs, I suppose.
Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.